Hello and welcome to this wonderful segment, Cocktails and Coffee, with myself, Sue McLachlan, and Tracy Patterson from Indie Coffee. We are here to talk all about refunds today. We are strategists who love chatting about, all things marketing related to digital products, courses, coaching, all those fun things. And refunds is a question that comes up a lot. Like, should you do a refund? How long should the refund period be? What should I put in my refund? Could I do no refund? Do I have to have conditions or no conditions? And so many other questions. And we are just going to be doing some chatting while we have our beverages of choice. Tracy is in Texas. I am in Australia. So we're on opposite sides of the world, hence the cocktails and coffee. But yeah, let's tackle this fun and in-depth subject. It'd just be should I do a refund or not? But there are so many nuances and there's lots of things to think about. But I want to start with, because Tracy has the absolute best definition. What is a refund? Like, what do you consider a refund? Because you might, people think about it in terms of a monetary sense, but it is actually not really that at all. So give us your refund definition.
Yeah. And I think that's what surprises people the most. I mean, including, on the coaching call we were on. And I was like, well, surprise everybody. All refunds are actually written by marketers. Like it is a part of copywriting. It's a sales tactic. And then it's backed up by all the legal stuff, and I think because in our societies, we're so used to using them for consumer protection, which was their original idea, that we put a lot of weight and we're like, oh, okay, I have to make sure that it's something that I can do and what's the best thing. And when you start to learn the online world, especially if you're in the course creating world or digital product world, you hear that it helps people not feel like there's a risk, right? It's supposed to help with that quote unquote no brainer style, decision. And so they're like, oh, what's going to make people happy and make people work? And it's it's less of a weight than it needs to be. Right. And what I said that day was just basically it is the amount of time that people need to know that you're not a liar. Right. So you make this big, bold promise in your headline and your subhead at the very top of your sales page, your service pages, your whatever page it is. And then the refund is the amount of time you're giving people to find out whether or not you're going to follow through with that. Right. So do they not need any time? Do they need 7 days, 14 days, a month, 12 months, whatever? All of that part becomes kind of secondary to the way that you are setting up the rest of it, and you're doing your own checks and balances. Right. And so it's not a case of, oh, I don't want them to get everything for free and then ask for all their money back. And which I know is one of your favorite points, and all of this other kind of heavier worry. And instead it becomes what will help people find out if you're legit, find out if they can learn from you, find out if they're actually going to enjoy, what's going on and if the investment is going to be helpful.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is the biggest reframe that people need to sort of consider when talking about about refunds, is that it's not about you and what you need. It is about your customer and what your customer needs. Because so many people are like, oh, but what about me? What if someone refunds and then I've got to give them their money back? And it's like, no, but what about you giving your customer a situation they feel safe to make a decision in? And you've got to remember, you are selling essentially an intangible product. When someone is going to buy your thing on the internet, no matter how glossy your sales page is, they really don't 100% know what they're going to get. They're getting this online digital thing. They read the sales page, they read the information, they think, and they're like, well, it sounds really good. I think this is right. I think this is what I need, but they don't know. And they're the ones taking the risk. And so what a refund does is it allows them to feel safer taking that risk. And it allows them to feel like, okay, so if I'm reading all this and I feel like it's going to do what it says on the tin, but what if it doesn't? Am I screwed? This is the internet. Would I be able to get my money back? What will happen? Am I just throwing my money into the abyss? So, instead of worrying about what if someone refunds and what if I as the course creator have to give my money back and what if someone's going to rip me off, think about, okay, well, do I want people to feel, good about their decision and give them the space to be able to evaluate whether my promises are actually true? And yeah, it's so important to put it on, to think from your customer's perspective and not from your own, in my opinion, anyway.
Definitely, right? And it's one of those things where, well, if anybody has ever heard me say anything, I'm always talking about how sales stuff is all about them, right? And
Yes.
not you, right? And that's
Mm.
the same for for whether you're writing this, for like every angle that you think about, like for all of the stuff. It all follows like the same part.
Yeah, totally. And what a refund, like when you have refunds on your page, like if you're like, there is no refunds, there is no chance you're going to be able to get your money back if, you're not happy with it. You have to be very, very explicitly clear about everything that they're going to get. And sometimes people, when it's like a digital download and they might be like, oh, well, someone could just get this and then ask for a refund and then I've got it and keep it. Sure, that is a potential. And, there may be a chance that someone can do that. Just like if you had a shop, there is a chance someone could come in and steal your stuff from
Yes.
that shop. There is a
Yeah.
chance. Yeah, it can happen. It is unfortunately human nature. But if you like structure everything around that, what if this happens, rather than looking at it from that customer perspective, how can I make this, how can I make more customers feel comfortable? It's just a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and it's that like you said, when someone has like an in-person shop, you always have to have, it's called shrinkage in the industry, right? In retail. And you know that there's like that percentage. Yeah. So
3% is
just
a
like,
standard.
yeah. Yeah. I was like, just like in a good business, or maybe I don't want to label it like a good business, but more a business that has kind of been through stuff, or has had a business coach that knows money, that like knows finances and knows cost buildups and all of that. Just like you need to keep a percentage aside for all your payment processing fees, right? Because those are always going to be 3 to 5%. So whenever you think about like your revenue, it's like, oh wait, hang on, 3 to 5% of that automatically goes out. It's the same thing whenever you're thinking about like refunds. Okay, if I have no more than 3 to 5%, I'm okay,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's that same thing.
And also, it's a really good indication, talking about that percentage. If you are, if you do have a digital product and you have a refund on it, if you are finding that your refund percentage is really high, then that could be a really good indication to be looking at, well, hey, what is in, like, where is my messaging going wrong? If I have got, like, say, 10% of people coming back to me asking for a refund saying that they're happy, is there something like wrong with how I'm presenting this? Is there something wrong in my actual course?
Exactly.
Am I giving people the wrong impression? I'm making a decision based on the impression I'm giving them, and then I'm getting this really high percentage. That's really important information to look at your own process,
Yes.
rather than being like a panic, like, oh my God, it's terrible. Like, what have I done wrong? And all these people are ripping me off. It's like, okay, what have you? I don't want to say that you've done something wrong, but obviously there is a disconnect there if you are getting
Yes.
extra high thing. And it's a case of being more of a scientist about it, rather than doom and gloom, like people are just out there to rip me off. Except that there will be a percentage. Like, let's call it
Yeah.
3%. Let's call it a shrinkage percentage. But if it's higher than that, that is very valuable information that, perhaps it's you're being extremely aggressive in your deadline and people are making a
Yes.
decision they don't feel comfortable about. Or perhaps you're saying that your course will do something that it just doesn't deliver, and that
Exactly.
needs to be addressed. So,
Yeah, it's that check and balance, right? So if you look back at that transformation, that promise, that result, whatever label you want to call it, it's all the same thing. If you put, like, if you check what you're saying at your primary headline and your primary subtitles, as well as what you're reiterating over and over again in your sales messaging, and if you're doing lives, like sometimes, especially like those of us that are really excited about what we do, we get a little carried away. So if you've ever accidentally overpromised something, or you're like, "Oh yeah, that's in it," and you're like, "Oh crap, I had to look at that," and it's not later, right? It's just a way to be like, have I been very transparent, been very clear, and been, put it in language that doesn't leave as much room for interpretation as possible, right? Because you can always use the FAQs at the bottom of the page for a bit of a boost, because if you're like, you can do this in 3 days, and then at the bottom it's like, well, how much time, how can I
If you
make this
spend
possible in 3 days, right?
12
And
hours a
then
day.
exactly, right, yeah. Yeah, and instead, you put in there, it's like, well, this is an ideal schedule. It's like, yeah, you will need to commit 2 to 3 hours a day in order to do this. Or, yes, you'll need to do whatever. Or you go, maybe that's just not the right promise. I know it sounds clickable. I know it sounds exciting, but if it's not realistic and if it makes people be like, oh my gosh, I hate my life. I can't believe I fell for this, and that whole like trust and situation is broken, then was that ever even worth it anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's like, yeah, it could be clickable, but to what extent, right? So it's always using that, as your backup and checking what it is that you're telling people. And I love how
Yeah.
you brought up the part about I will call them over aggressive, tactics that people throw out there that are just that's where the reputation comes in as being gross, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. But also, I guess if that's something that you choose to do, that you want to have, really fixed deadlines and be, I'd say pushy, like with what you're doing, like this is only open this year, and you've got 48 hours, and you have to make a decision. You have to be even more, open with offering refunds in that situation. Like the better and more solid your refund, the better, because if you're pushing people to make a decision potentially quicker than they would want to, especially if it's you know, one, two, three, $5,000 program like that. Sometimes people need to take time and maybe they need to consider it and they need to go, well, that wasn't in my budget, especially if you've only got it open for a week in a whole year. Like maybe they've only just discovered you and then they've got this thing and they're like, well, I didn't have a $3,000 expense in my budget, so I'm going to have to consider that. And if you're not prepared to then offer a refund because you're asking people to make a decision potentially faster than they want to. So I just think, in that situation, the better the refund and the more happy you are to offer that and stick to it and honor it, because you're asking people to make, that snap decision. I think you need to back it up by going, all right, I'm going to give you 30 days to look at everything. And you get to evaluate in that 30 days, is this right for you? And you have to be prepared that some people are going to come back and go, actually, it's not. And not,
yeah,
resent them and not make them jump through a million hoops to be able to get the refund if you're kind of pushing that quick decision. That's my
yeah.
opinion. Some people are like, oh no, but they're just going to rip me off. And it's like, no, like
Yeah,
give them
and
that
that's that
person.
fear. Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, that's that fear, that's that scarcity, that's all those pieces, but you have to realize that basically what you're asking people is to buy now and try later.
Yes, exactly.
It's like they don't have, a dressing room to go and see if this shirt really fits, right? Or even like Amazon, they give you a try first, then buy, like on clothing and things when you get it. It's like if online retailers, giants, because people will wear it to an event and then take it back, it's like if they're realizing that is an issue, how much, is it an issue for individuals who are at a higher emotional level because they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, is this the right thing for my business?" And, and how am I feeling about this? And if my budget's limited, right? Because either my time's limited or my money's limited, then, can is this even going to be possible? And what is this going to do to my family? And how is this going to mess up the quarter? Right. And if you notice by those examples, we're also talking about these being at people who are often earlier stage, people that are getting inundated with the possibilities and the options and all of this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And they might not have gotten to the point where they feel as much comfort or as much control in
Yeah.
knowing what to say. Oh, that sounds cool, but no thanks.
Yeah.
They're still in a
Yeah.
stage of, oh, this is going to help me and this is going to fix it all. And which is on them to think that it's going to fix it all. Right. But
Yeah.
that's why we have these refunds to be like, no, we're clearly stating what we're going to help you with. It's very honest, very transparent. There's my little checklist parts. And I still want you to see, if this really is, because a lot of times refunds are not a reflection on the quality of what we're doing.
Yes.
They're also a reflection on how much that person just believed because they wanted to or thought that, it was going to be the savior that they were after, right?
Sorry, I was going to
That
say
is
they got
where
sucked into the FOMO.
yeah, yeah, which is a separate tactic, right? Because it's like the part that I was talking about, it's like that's where you can in future launches, you can really really angle on the pre-launch side.
Yeah.
And and really help that have that kind of longer breathing room, right? But if you're just kind of like copying and pasting these old school tactics that you don't feel comfortable with yourself, but you were told it's the only way to sell,
Yeah.
so you're giving it a try, or maybe you haven't even put that much thought into it. You just think that's how it's done. Then it's like, well, you have to decide what your level of responsibility is there, right? And what that long-term game is. Because again, it's like most of the time the refunds are not a reflection on you. And when they are, like, you don't have to make people jump through hoops, but you can easily ask them why. Like, is there
Yes.
something we
Yes.
could have done better? Right? So you're not putting the blame, the pressure, any of that on the buyer. You're just asking for yourself. You're like, we want to make sure that this is a fantastic experience for future people. Is there anything that we could have done different? Or was there anything that you were expecting that didn't happen, that didn't
Yes.
happen? And
Yeah.
that's why you're asking, for this refund.
And that helps you to plug the gaps, like what I was saying earlier about
Exactly.
if there's a disconnect between what you're saying and what you deliver, maybe you haven't, that's not something you've deliberately done. You just haven't realized, or you've said something in a way that someone expected one thing and they've got in there and found it something different. Not because you're some sleazy marketer, just because when you're in your own offer, sometimes you can't see how things might be perceived.
Yes.
And if you got the same, if you got refund requests and 5 people said the same thing, you might be like, oh my God, I didn't even think how they could have seen it
Yeah,
that way. Or I didn't realize that from what I said, they thought this thing might have been included and it's not. So that's why I say when
exactly.
you can look at it from a more of a scientist perspective and wanting to find out what's happened rather than taking it as this personal attack that your course is shit and you need to like
And it's all
revisit.
your fault. And it's all,
Yeah. It's so easy to fall into that. So it's I guess it's like trying to depersonalize it a little bit and just be like, all right, well, I want to find out what's happened here. Um and yeah, I guess it's one of the things that I find really tricky and I don't know if I have a great answer for this. So this is where our riffing might be, we might go down a tangent, but I'll see how we go. So with the whole FOMO and the whole strategies around urgency and putting deadlines on things, there is a reason why that is used so much in our industry, but not just our online industry, in sales in general across the whole world. Black Friday
Yes.
sales only go for 4 days because you are asking people to make a decision in a period of time. And I know for myself, I always, can get a little bit of resistance around sending those last minute emails. Like even the other day, Tracy, you said to me, so are you going to send another email? And I was like, but I've already sent 2 today. And
It's like,
but
and
the thing is it works because if people have been on the fence and they haven't made a decision and their time is running out to make a decision, you're saying, all right, this deadline is finishing. Now's when you need to make a decision. And, you know, I don't know, I don't want to generalize, but, for so many people, they will find that a significant percentage of their sales comes in that last period when you're
yeah.
saying now's your time to make a decision. So it is a really, important thing to include without, and even if that is a little bit pushy, I guess I'll say. But that's where the refund becomes so crucial to be able to offer it. Because if you are getting people to make a decision and they've been on the fence and they're umming and ahhing, you're like, all right, make the decision. I guess it's important to be able to give them an out. So making the decision, they might be like, oh, thank God I did that. All right, I would have missed out otherwise, and I'm so glad I did. But if people are on the fence, there's going to be a percentage of those people who were going, oh, I only made the decision because I was running out of time. And now I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it was a bad decision. And if you hold it against them for making the decision that you asked them to make and they have changed their mind on it,
I love that.
I don't, that's not really acting in a way where you're really putting your audience and your customers first is how I see it. Because you're the one who forced the decision. Like,
Yeah.
So I guess that's where I see the refunds are kind of, that's your side of responsibility for that, thing that you've done in your business to drive the sales.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly legitimate to want to drive the sales. But then I think it's more about backing it up and giving them a way where if they decided, you know, a week later when they had a bit more time and space to think about it, that that was not the right decision for me. Why did I do that? Now I can't pay my rent next month. God, I was just doing it because you were like, but decide. Then, you know, if you then make them jump through hoops and you make them feel guilty, or there's some kind of negative experience for them, they will probably never come. Their opinion of you will be permanently tainted and
And shared.
shared. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just think it's about, you know, I think it's about being honorable to give people the opportunity to have a little bit of breathing space if you are forcing the decision.
Yeah. And, I want us to get to the different options, like all the things, because
Yes.
people think that it's either no refund or 30 days, like we get into these kind of polarity, these extremes. But before that, I want to make sure that we have a very clear distinction on what we're talking about here, because you can have quote unquote urgency, time urgency, like FOMO only in the sense of like you're saying all these people have already joined, are you in? Like you can use a I don't want to say softer, and I'm really close to saying like a more integral, but like you can use the kind of tactics without being the way that makes people feel like you're saying if you believed in yourself, you'd sell your house and you would buy my shit. Right? Like that's the part where it's like, whoa, that's way too much. And urgency is a tactic, but just like anything with sales, it doesn't have to be about you. Like you're the one that is creating this arbitrary timeline for something and
Exactly.
making other people to fit into it. So what's another version of urgency? Well, that is making it about them. Why is it urgent for them to do something and doing it on an internal urgency? And that's when you can really hone in on who you're talking to, which helps people make a decision. If you think about why is it the right time for them from their perspective, and what does their world look like if they do it versus if they don't,
Yeah.
then anybody who sees it and is like, oh, well, that doesn't match me. Okay, great. Then this isn't the right time for you anyway. And my job is to help you make a decision. The decision's made. It's a you've done great, I've done great, we've done brilliant. Versus like the whenever we say the gross, when we say pressury, when we say slimy, all those other buzzwords around sales, we're talking about the kind where it's like, I don't care what you're personally going through. You must follow my lead. You must buy my stuff. You must do this and that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're this horrible human being, right?
And if you
Those
don't
are
have
the
the
kind.
money, find the money. And if you can't find the
Yeah,
money, there's something wrong with you. And like, you know, yeah.
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 Yeah, that's the kind where it's like, wow, like, would you say that to your grandma? The classic grandma test. Like, would you tell your grandmother that she's horrible if she doesn't eat all your cookies, like right now before you leave? Because you're 5 and you'll cry otherwise, right? So
Mm.
it's like it's one thing, like if she tries it, and it's a whole other if she like eats the whole batch in front of you. And it's that level of like maturity and request, and that kind of like parallels, right? Versus if you say it's like, this is who's been waiting for it. This is why it's helpful for you. This opportunity hasn't been here before because these conditions didn't exist. Now I'm bringing them to you. And if you don't do it, then it can look like this. But if you do, it can look like that. And if someone's like, oh, okay, yes, I now see this. I now understand this. I'm cool with it versus no, that doesn't apply. Both of those are wins because both people are coming away feeling like you've lifted them up and that you have talked to them like an adult, and that you respect their decision making. And so those other people will still stay in your audience. They'll remember to refer you to somebody who is right and all these other like beautiful things. So I
Yeah.
just, for the sake of everybody watching this and
Yeah.
listening to this, I just want to make sure that we don't want anybody to feel bad for using a deadline, because you and your team cannot stay available forever, right? That's why we
Exactly.
have open and close, because it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of strategy,
Oh, yeah.
it takes a whole team bandwidth, all this kind of stuff to make it happen. So there's nothing wrong with turning it off. It's just not letting somebody else feel your pressure, but letting them
Exactly.
choose whether or not they have their own, right?
I guess that's where a refund and a deadline works together so synergistically, because what
Mm,
having a really I don't want to say generous. I guess I want to say like customer focused refund policy is going
Yes.
to
Yeah.
allow people to do, in that if you're forcing a deadline, but they're still going, I'm not sure, it's allowing them to make the decision knowing that if they made it in haste and if they made the wrong decision, they're covered. And that you're like, you're giving them an extra, time to consider, because some people are like, oh yeah, sweet, that sounds good, and they'll buy it. Other people have a whole process that they need to go through.
Yes.
Maybe they need to consult with a partner, spouse, family. Maybe they need to go, oh, well, I could do that. I was actually going to, do this other thing. Do I want to reschedule that? Like, there's so many things that could be going on in someone's head around that
Yeah.
decision-making
Just
process.
having time to think about it.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
so,
like
so
just
yeah.
taking time.
But that's where, having that robust, customer focused refund allows you to feel more comfortable, I think, with a deadline, because you're saying, hey, it's okay. Like, this is the deadline. However, you've got a full 30 days, 60 days, however long, to reflect and to ensure that you feel happy that you made the right decision, is essentially what you're offering. You're offering people the reassurance that if they decided that maybe they made a wrong decision, it's okay. You're not going to, castrate them and, send them to the brimstone world
Shame.
for daring to say yes when they were in a state of not sure. You're allowing them to feel more comfortable, and that's a win. So it's like that, those deadline and the refund, can work together, and it can also make the deadline experience a nicer experience for your customer, because it's about them. You're giving them the space that your time doesn't allow.
Yeah. And sorry for the Game of Thrones flashback there, but that's what I think about every time, it's just like shame. And this is
I
where
haven't
we have those
seen that.
alternatives. I'll at least send you the meme of that part. But this is where where you have alternatives, right? Everything from actually letting people try, like go into the first lesson, the first module, the first something before they're actually charged, to there's a wide world of things that you can
Yes.
write into your refunds, right? So back to what we said all the way at the top,
Right.
they're not legal things yet. They're first written from a copywriting, like from a sales messaging and marketing standpoint, and then they're backed up by it. So you can kind of take the pressure off and play with it. It doesn't have to be 0 to 30 days, right? You can have a 7-day. You can have a time frame through the content versus an actual calendar time, right? Where they can get to the first 1 to 3 lessons or through the first module. And then nothing else is unlocked, until later, right? That's the beauty of the tech side. What are some great examples that you've seen of ways to play with this idea of refunds? I have one
Yeah.
on a digital product where I say there's not one because it's instant downloadable. However, if you haven't logged into it, then email us because we can
Yes.
check that on the back end, right? It's like
Yeah.
email us and, and we can just part ways and it's no big deal. Right.
Yeah.
So what are some examples and variations or things that you like to play with?
Yeah, so I guess there is that spectrum all the way from specifying no refunds up front. But I do think when you are specifying no refunds, it's really important to make sure that people can have, it's very clear exactly what they're going to get.
Yes.
So for example, we have templates that are downloadable. So we make sure that every template page, someone can go into a live page and see exactly what it's going to look like. They can see a full demo. So that way they're not going, well, what's it actually going to look like? Because in that situation,
From this little thumbnail, I think it'll be great.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
so things like considering, okay, if I'm going to be like, and this is the thing, is there's no right or wrong. There's no refund police that are going to go, oh, but you have to give a refund. You can choose on certain products or, whatever. If you don't want to give a refund, that is completely okay because it's a business decision for you. Through to having something where you will give someone, a full 60 days to look at everything. The very first digital product that I bought back in 2019 was Copy School from
Yes,
Joe
yeah.
and Rye. And the thing that made me buy it, because that was a pretty big expense. Like that was like me going, what is this, buying courses world? And they were like, we so strongly believe in this that we are going to give you 2 months to try everything. You can go through every
Yeah.
single lesson, every single course. And if you don't feel after 2 months that you have got your $2,000 worth of this program, we don't want your money. We don't deserve it. And, that kind of really opened my eyes. And also, man, it really made me feel like, okay, all right, well, I don't even know what this copywriting stuff is. I think I do. I think it's going to help me, but I don't know because I've never done a copywriting course before. And so it made me go, all right, okay, I can do that. Like,
Yeah.
worst case, if I get in there and I'm like, this isn't helping me. I know that. And they were all extra. I remember this one thing. They were like, we'll be really Canadian about it. And we won't even like, we'll just be like,
Won't
okay.
even ask you questions. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but that personalization and that whole, like, don't worry if you don't think this is worth your money. We don't want, we don't want you to be in. And that always just struck me because it helped me do that. And that unlocked, the entire like
Yeah.
world
But
of,
I mean, it's a fantastic example because if we peel that back, you hear the personality in the wording that they use, right? And the fun that they had with it, by like kind of
yeah.
like, picking on themselves, in that way. But you also heard like she was buying what was considered a high-end, bigger course in a sophisticated market normally, and she was brand new. Right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
so a lot of times what you'll hear, especially from the people that teach the uber high pressure stuff, that it's like you wouldn't expect to have any new person. You would only expect to have these people who already know, they're already
Yeah.
seasoned, they've already gone through this. And here you just heard a story of somebody who had never been through any of this
Yeah.
and was like, "Oh, do I take a chance on it? Okay, I feel comfortable with it because look at the humor, the personality, but also the confidence level, and the bravery of what they're
Yes.
saying in that." Right? So
Yeah.
you had a very good sense of who you were about to learn from just by reading that, which we call micro copy. But just by like hearing all of that,
Yeah.
and then it's also like, okay, so by the time I personally bought Copy School, I had already been through 2 or 3 other copywriting courses and had a coach.
Yeah.
So I knew the reputation, I had this stuff, and I was still like, "Oh, do I buy if I've already learned all this other stuff, do I still buy this as well? Do I even have the capacity to go
Mm.
through this stuff
Yeah.
while I'm already a part of all these other things?" Like
Yeah.
this particular product has a massive reputation, they're highly, highly praised. Most people who are in the industry now came from there, like that's where they learned from. So it's great to learn from the master teachers, but can I do it? Do I have the capacity? So when I looked at it, it was more of a no, you don't have to go through it like a like school, even though it's called school.
Yes.
You don't
Yeah.
start at kindergarten and graduate, right? You can play around in it. You can pick and choose the lessons that build on each other. We will tell you what they are. If we make a reference to a word in another one and you don't understand it, then yes, there is another lesson, like a
Mm.
vocab, like a cheat sheet, and those are all so peeling back my experience with the same product, it's like, oh, okay, these are the pieces that the creator is putting into the product to help everybody's experience go well. And then at that point, the guarantee becomes the bow it's wrapped in versus, like the heavy thing that that either it's like a big gatekeeper of no, you're not allowed, or yes, you can do this. Instead, it's like, oh no, we have this fantastic thing for you, and it's wrapped up in this beautiful ribbon. Here you
Yeah.
go. Unwrap it, enjoy it. If you don't like it, wrap it back up. you know?
Also, I think it's about how long the course is as well. Like, Copy School's really comprehensive and there's a lot in it. So if they
A
only offered
lot
you
in it,
seven
yeah.
7 days, I don't think it gives you enough time to make a fair chance. Whereas if you've got a workshop that's a half an hour or a 1 hour long workshop, 7 days might be appropriate because you're like, hey, this is only going to take you an hour. You got a week to find an hour to go through it. Whereas if you do have a comprehensive or a signature program, I think a longer guarantee is more appropriate because it might take a longer time for someone to go through it and, actually take action and implement to the point where they feel like, all right, okay, I do feel like, this was worth it, or I got an ROI on it. If an ROI is important, which is return on investment. So for some people, that's their decision-making process. For me, every business-related course that I buy, I'm like, will I make more money as a result of doing this? That is my decision
Yep.
for the most part. I mean, I do have my emotional FOMO side. But for the most part, that's the ultimate thing when I'm deciding if I'm going to buy a course. Do I think I will make, for a business side? For personal stuff, completely different thinking process, but that's important as well.
Yeah.
So making sure that your refund period is appropriate to the amount of content in the course, I think is appropriate. You could, if you wanted to, ask people to do things in order to get their refund. Now, again, this is personal. I don't personally like doing that. I just personally like people to be able to make a decision and not have to justify their decision and feel like they've done something wrong, because often when people have to justify it, they feel really guilty about it. And then, you risk that they may lie to you just to try and keep you happy because you're making them do a thing to
Show
be
their
able
work,
to,
right?
yeah, like they've done something wrong. And that's just never a nice thing, in my opinion, but it's that balance against not having people, I don't know. So it's a balance against not having people just jump in and then go, oh, I want a refund. But then also, is that is also potentially okay. Like there could be some reason that is nothing to do with the course. Maybe there was an illness in the family. Maybe there's been some drama that's happened and suddenly they're like, oh my God, I just spent $2,000 on this thing and now my, cat is in the vet and is going to die. I need the money. And if you denied someone for that reason, they will probably turn around and go, oh, I didn't like your course, because they're too ashamed.
Yeah.
And if you have this freedom for them to be able to make a decision, then they're not going to feel as bad about it, which ultimately is better for you, in my opinion. But what's your thoughts around the do the work guarantees?
Yeah. And I very much see this from the creator side and from the potential student or client side as being a personality based difference, right? As well, like people's different level of personality, different level of emotional, identity, and like what they see. Because a lot of times you see those with people who are a lot stronger personalities. They're like, well, we only want action takers. So if you actually took action, then you'll have these homeworks, you'll have these things filled out, you'll be able to answer all these things. And that doesn't fit with the spectrum of potential students that you have, right? In your course. And like, Sue and I keep saying like course, but your refund comes with your services. It comes with any sort of product, that you're putting out, including a service as a product, all those kind of things. We're just using, kind of words as an overall banner. But it's the main people from my experience that have done it, those are people that are very much like if you're a discer, they're a red, right? Like if you know anything about like the disc personality thing, it's like they're a red, you know. They're the quote unquote stronger, authoritative, assurance, confident, first to stand up, first to get things done, sort of, archetype, right?
Mhm.
So the the same way that someone like Sue, who's like, I would never ask somebody to justify, like, that just sounds horrible to me. Well, that's the complete other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So whenever you see it, it's kind of like, well, where do I fit? But where would my students fit? Right?
Yeah.
Because we are dynamic human beings that have multiple ways to process information. We all use speed and we all use social and we all use emotional. It's just a way of buying that is kind of more primary than the others, right? So if you're like, I'm really sensitive, I couldn't imagine, because basically I feel like this says, please justify your existence. And if I don't like the answer, I don't want this from you. And the other person is like, why on earth would somebody do this without ever making sure they had the right support or the enough time or yeah. So it's like, am I attracting the people that match me? Um, am I attracting people that could be from anywhere or that are the exact opposite? As well as always thinking about what kind of community do I want to create? What do I want their experience to be? And is there a happier medium? Maybe it's a case of you want to make sure that they've at least tried it before they
Yeah.
decide. So you want to make sure that they've watched some of the videos, that they've tried some of the lessons, that they've showed up to a live call, because otherwise how could they make a good decision?
Yeah.
How would they know, right? And hopefully people can hear how that feels different than just saying, you must be an action taker, so you must show me these worksheets and you must fill out this and you must answer this and this. And now even like my own tonality where I'm saying it like, it feels very different than basically we want to make sure within these 7 days, this week, this 30 day, this whatever, that you've at least given the content a try. And if
Okay.
you haven't, if you've realized that you actually don't have any capacity for it and you're not going to use it, then you've never looked at anything and therefore you also qualify, for it, right?
Exactly,
So
because
so
that's
yeah.
if someone's never used or looked at it, then why would you feel like giving them a refund is not appropriate? Like if you
Yeah, yeah,
bought something from a shop and you never even took it out of the box and you're like, you know what? I didn't need that. Can take it. It is a legal
yes.
requirement for a shop to accept it back. So why feel bad? Like why, resent someone who's never looked at your stuff for asking for a refund? They've not even used it. Like,
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's where it goes into that you can kind of experiment and you can play with these things because this is a marketing thing. And then you just make sure that your terms and conditions and your terms of service match, on the back end. And always people, always please comply with whatever your local,
yes.
requirements are, whatever your local like trading standards are. That goes beyond any advice from any coach out there.
Mm.
That's a
Yeah.
big, massive asterisk to make sure because different countries have different
Yes.
requirements on these things. But from what we're talking about, and especially because we're talking about Australia and the US, that these are the perspectives that we're offering where yes, you provide there's a set of trading standards, but you also have the flexibility with what you offer.
Yes.
Not every country allows that. So always follow
Yeah.
your own stuff. But
Yeah.
one of the beauties here is like it is not just understanding like how much flexibility you have, but also understanding that it can change.
Yes. Yeah.
Just because you sold the product with one type of guarantee at one time doesn't mean that you can't ever change it later because you can.
Yes.
What you do have to do though is just make sure that whoever bought from this condition over here like follows that versus when you
Yeah.
update your return policy, then that applies to these other buyers, right?
Yeah.
Because when you won't fully know until people start buying things. Like I have
Yes.
an on-demand digital product, technically called Evergreen, technically called a mini course. Anybody at any point can click on a link and buy it. And my refund thing says, if you haven't used it, let me know. Um, but otherwise, it's there. There's not a refund unless you haven't opened it at all. Because in my mind, it's a 3-hour workshop to follow along with. It's broken into lessons, but you listen to me and you do the work at the same time. And I have like worksheets and I tell you like these practices and we go through this whole thing. I have a student who's in there right now, and she was sending me a note. She was talking about how much she loved it and all these great little things. And I was like, oh, you're so sweet. And like all these things she didn't expect, all these things that are great. But then she said, I have to break this up into 20 to 40-minute chunks and do it. So I've only made it into lesson 2. Now, these videos are like 7 to 12 minutes long, and they're intended to be done like almost live, basically, right? Like with me. And the whole idea is that it's done in a day, right? So you sit there for 3 hours and you do all this stuff. I never imagined that somebody would piecemeal it out to like 20-minute chunks, even if it meant that you had to pause in the middle of the same lesson
Yeah.
to move on. Right. Because I talk about like, if you have to do it, then these are the lessons, these are the places to break it apart. But otherwise, it's meant to be done in a marathon session. And so when she's like, I'm going through it, I'm absolutely loving it. I'm following the process. It's really cathartic. It's really helpful. But yeah, I haven't finished it yet because I'm doing this. And now, as the creator, I'm now hearing from, the audience. I'm hearing from the buyers. And it's like, oh, does that need to inform either how I tell people how they can use it and or what I do with my no refund or my 7-day refund, or if you haven't used it yet, it's like, do I need to change that at all? Now that I'm
Yeah.
hearing from other people who aren't like me, right? She's
Yeah.
not on the high
Yeah.
emotional side. She's not on the high assertive side. She's like, and in the middle, then is there something that I need to do? Right. So these things can very much change as your experiences with people or as you add new things, as you redo your digital products, like all this kind of stuff. It is just as malleable as every other piece, just as much as you
Yeah.
can change your sales page at any time.
Yeah. You totally can. And one thing to consider as well is that, that feedback, maybe someone's using your product differently to what you intended. So that might inform a change, in a refund policy. But also something to consider is how new and tested your offer is. Because I would generally say if you are doing something for the first time, you need to offer the best guarantee you could probably ever offer
Yeah.
because it is an untested thing. You've created this thing for the first time. You're asking people to take a risk on you. You don't, you may not have testimonials from people who've gone through it yet. It may be the first time that you've done it and it's not your best thing. And you're going to do it one time to put it out there, test it, and then refine it later. And this first version, the first iteration, I think has to have the strongest refund, guarantee because, like I said, you're asking people to take the risk on you. So when you've had a program that's been around for 2 years and you've had thousands of people going through it, maybe that's the time you want to be like, all right, you have all the testimonials. You can, you can ask
Yes.
prior students, you can see evidence. I'm going to give you the first, module for free. And in that case, you might be like, I have given people enough, to be able to make a good decision. So you might have a tighter refund policy. So I guess it's
Yep.
about looking at it, not just from the refund, but looking at the whole perspective, how you're
Mhm.
selling it, what information you're giving people, how new is it? How much faith do you have in it? Like, you might have a brand new program that you're like, I freaking love this. This is so awesome. But then the first lot of people go through it might give you a whole lot of feedback and might
Like,
bubble a
all
little.
right, let's redo it.
Or,
Yeah.
like, let's make these changes. And I guess, that's a case of it. It's not just this one thing like refund, yes or no. That's why we've talked for 45 minutes about refunds because
Yes.
there's so many different considerations, but also,
Mhm.
the underlying message that I hope you take out of this is there's no right way to do it or wrong way to do it. There is your way to do it. And B, there is no fixed way to do it. You can have something different today that you have tomorrow. You can see someone else
Yes.
doing something and go, oh my God, I really like how they did that. You can have the same guarantee that's presented differently, like the whole, copy school way of going, don't worry, we'll be really Canadian about it. You just have to send us an email. We'll go, okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the same refund as like it's 100%, but it's positioned differently. So remember that when you do have an offer and it's like that first time you're offering or it is pretty new, that, again, put yourself in the customer's perspective. You're asking them to trust that your
Yes.
offer that is potentially untested or only a handful of people have gone through. So the more support you can give through your refund to help them feel more confident in that, the better.
Yeah, and that is so good because honestly, that's opposite advice from what a lot of people say, right? Because again, a lot of people are thinking that they're thinking of refunds from that scary, fearful, I'm never going to make money in my business. Everybody's going to hate me. What am I going to do, right? But when we flip that and we look at it from the audience perspective, it's like let's give them more protection.
Yes.
Let's give them more flexibility as that sign of we're working together. Because even if you look at some of the big names out there and you look at like old sales pages versus new ones, you'll notice that their guarantees get more and more grander and the older the product is. And what Sue here just said was that actually do the opposite. Be more gracious, be more expansive with what you're doing as that, kind of like tip your hat. I'm so excited that you're taking a chance
Yeah.
on me. And that very much ties into that transparency and being open with people, right? It's okay to say, this is brand new
Yeah.
offer. It's okay to say, I haven't tried this before and I really want you to do it with me. That is not a dent on your authority at all to tell people this. You still know what you're doing. You're just trying something new to apply it into a different container. So as part of your guarantee, you can say, this is a brand new container and I'm really excited to bring this to you. However, I'm going to be experimenting and learning while you're also going through this. So I would love to offer you this kind of guarantee. I really want you to go through it. I still believe in the material. I still believe in the coaching that we're going to do together, in the Q&A calls and the whatever that you have part of this stuff. So I would love for you to be with me. You could even tell them that this isn't going to be the kind of, guarantee that's offered forever.
Yeah.
You just want to do it right now as a sign of respect and thanking them for coming along with you. right? And so don't wait until you're thousands and thousands of people in to finally give people like a big one, because that's very fearful. That's
Mm.
very like, that scarcity, like strict mindset. Give that to them up front and thank them. Thank them for joining you. Thank you them for believing in you and trying to go through that with you.
Exactly.
So I love that, Sue, because that is a great point that is definitely not advised, but it's also not reflected on a lot of the examples out there. But when you take it from the, oh God, they're gonna hate me, to what best supports my students, my clients, my whatever you want to
Yeah.
call them, that order is definitely the most expansive and just the most helpful for them. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up for everybody,
Yeah.
because I think that was a very important
But
point.
I guess it's that whole thing about flipping the script, like, because you might be thinking of
Yeah.
it like, oh, but what if they don't? What if they hate it and they don't like it, and then I'm just going to have to offer refunds? Well, if you have to offer refunds, then maybe there's something wrong with what you're offering, and that's a perfectly
Yeah.
legitimate thing. And when you're thinking of it from you, you can make your refund a bit like constrictive because you're doing it from a place of fear,
Mm.
as opposed to doing it from thanking the people that are giving you the opportunity
Yeah.
to essentially test out your stuff. And so I guess
Yeah.
it's that customer first. And one, there's two last things. One really quick last thing is, if you are going to offer a guarantee that's very generous because you are doing a new product, then please stick to that guarantee. I recently had the experience of buying a new software tool, brand new, never, it was like this beta lifetime launch thing. And they said, it's not out yet. So you couldn't even see it. They kind of talked about it and did these demos in their Facebook group. And I
Ooh.
was like, oh my God, this looks kind of cool. I just sort of stumbled upon it. But I was like, oh, I don't know. Do I want to spend $250 on this when I don't even know what it's going to do? But that was like, oh, but it'll be $100 a month after that. So I was like, well, could be a good idea. They said it was a 30-day guarantee, but then something happened and it got pushed out, which also made me go. And then they said, all right, well, it's a 60-day guarantee from the 16th of September. So you will have 2 months to try it out. So I was like, oh, great. I'm busy. I can't be asked trying it now. I'll try it sometime before then. So I tried it, went into it, immediately logged in and went, no, this is not actually what I thought it was. It's not going to help me. It doesn't do the thing I want. Was in the app for a total of 10 minutes. I then said, oh, okay, I've had a chance. I've looked around. I want a refund. And they were like, okay, well, you have to send us a screenshot of you logged into the app. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
So I did that.
Why?
And she said, oh, it's for our record keeping purposes. And I was like, it's your app, but okay. And so I did that. And then she comes back and goes, oh, well, actually, I'm sorry. It's actually gone past the 30-day refund period. So we'll be nice and we'll give you $100 of your $250 back. And I was like, what? And so then I had to spend my time going back and digging through the Facebook group. It took me 20 minutes to find the post that they randomly put one day in the Facebook group saying, oh, actually, we're extending it. Screenshot that, sent it to them, waited for 2 days, and then no email, no anything, just the $250 refund showed up. And it left me in a, feeling like just really horrible and like, oh, they weren't being respectful of me for testing out this brand new released thing. I'm never going to say a good thing about that, even though it could have been good for other people. It was a voice generation software and they only had one Australian accent in there. So I was like, well, I'm not going to use, and my voice sounded horrible. So for me, it's not good, but for someone else, it could be really good. And I could be like, oh, actually, this is really cool. But now I will not say a nice thing about it ever again. And, just because of the way they handled that. So be, really conscious. If you are going to offer a guarantee, don't pull back on it and be stingy and go, oh, well, well, this is that. Be gracious about it. Like if you've got to be gracious and offer the guarantee, be gracious in delivering the guarantee would be my message.
Yeah, and make sure that any support staff knows what you've promised, right? Like train them and let them know what happens, because that often it's like, but the founder said this, why are you now telling me that? And it does that is a distrust from the whole brand, even though you realize that it's certain individuals, you may like logically and consciously know, oh, this person just probably didn't know that this was the new thing. Instead, it's like, I can't believe you're making me do this. And now I've completely disconnected and lost everything that you've ever said.
Yeah.
Now.
And if that was a course creation situation, you've got to think that there is a chance. Like, this is a thing where they're only offering one product and there's a 50 different tiers of it. But generally speaking, in the digital product world, you're selling multiple things. And you could potentially be burning a future customer over their experience with this offer. And, I would hope, because Tracy and I are big proponents of this, we're building relationships with our customers, not doing transactional selling where it's about this one transaction. And doing that means that, if customers are with you for a long time, you would be hoping they'll be buying future things from you. And maybe they're refunding because that specific product wasn't right for them, but something else you do might be perfect and they might love it. But if you've burned them and given them a bad experience on this one thing, they're pretty much burned for life, and worse. They could then, if they really didn't like the experience, go and tell everyone else about it or post in a public Facebook group.
Yeah.
Or, someone else in a Facebook group says, have you ever experienced this company? And everyone's like, oh yeah, it was horrible. And, that's then a perception going out to others trying to make a decision. So
very, very much so.
But we could talk, I'm probably sure we could do another hour on this. We're up to almost an hour. But I just thought I would just, finish it off by saying at the end of the day, whilst there are all these nuances and situations and different things you could consider, the most important thing to realize, there's no one telling you what you have to do or not do. It is entirely your decision. It can be different on different products within your business, and you can change your mind and change things at any time. There is no fixed thing to what you're doing. There is no thing you have to do. You can, choose what you feel you're most comfortable with and adjust it as you change as well. So don't feel like it's something you have to get right or wrong. And if you get it wrong, your business is screwed forever. Like this is a learning thing. It's a changing, it's adjusting, and, feeling what's appropriate for you and for your audience and your products.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And, a reminder for everybody, it's like, if you are wondering about your own, even if you want to say, this is what I do, what do you think about this? Or how can I change it? Or, what? We're happy to hear from you. You could just drop in a question. You can send a screenshot or copy and paste in what you have in there, or any other questions that you have about anything in this online business world, marketing, sales. I mean, I still geek out about finance, but in any of those fun pieces of giving you a sustainable business, right? Because we don't want you to just have a flash in the pan. And us two doing this together, this is going to become a regular segment. So we would love to hear your questions. What are your thoughts? What topics do you want us to cover?
Yeah.
So fill out the forums, let us know, and we'll be here to answer.
Yeah, and we love riffing on stuff. We get quite passionate and fired up about things. But, if we can get passionate and fired up about things that you want to hear us talking about, then all the better. It'll be more enjoyable for everyone.
Yeah.
So we shall leave this episode of cocktails and coffee here. I've finished my coffee. Tracy's finished her cocktail. So we shall see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.